2. Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia. This is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
Hey, sweetheart.
You look like
So,
a fortune teller. In a good way, in a good way.
I see. Seriously, I see in the future. I see great things for you in the future.
Wonderful. I had a topic I wanted to talk about. So I was coming back from Lakewood last weekend, and I was listening to a podcast called 1840.
Mhm.
And it's an old episode where they had a gentleman named Shulam Dean who wrote a book years ago. I think it was called Those Who Wander Are Not Lost, or something like that. And
Sounds familiar.
he's an ex-chassid, and he was talking about how to handle your kids when they start questioning, their Yiddishkeit and start acting out. And I think he used the wrong words, because what he said was, if your kid comes to shul and doesn't wear a yarmulke, you should respect them for that decision. And I would have to disagree with the respecting them for that decision, but I agree in the fact of not reacting or making a scene or causing an issue. And so the topic I wanted to talk about was, when your kids start questioning your, way of life, how have you reacted? Stories of people around you that have reacted, and any advice to give to people?
Wow, so that's quite a big order.
Yeah, I understand.
Let me see. Shall I answer that directly, or shall I answer it? Shall I do a Camilla Harris answer?
Oh, don't give me word salads. I caught myself doing that earlier today when I was speaking to a guy. I was like, I just sound obnoxious.
Or she just dodges the question by talking about her life, her hard life. Yes, yeah. Yeah. Nixon did that too, by the way, one time.
Interesting.
Some reporter asked him, forgot a certain question about something. I forgot what it was. And Nixon said, well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about myself. And he just went on and on about his own biography and never answered the question. First of all, it depends what the kid is asking, how they're asking, what they're doing. It's a very individual thing. One advice I could give parents: you're right, don't overreact. Don't overreact. And the problem is with a lot of parents, especially Bali Tshuva, is when a kid starts questioning or, starts to doubt their place in Yiddishkeit, right away the parents get scared and they're afraid the kid's going off the derech. And that's when they overreact. The thing to do is to try to answer your child the best of your knowledge, or to point him or her into the right direction where they can get that answer. If you don't know, say, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to it, but let me see if I can talk to somebody who does, and let me look it up and get back to it. Try to be as calm and objective as possible and just answer the particular question. As far as like a boy, going to shul and refusing to put on a yarmulke, you have to let him know that that in this world, that there are we dress for the occasion, you might say. Like, say to them, tell me, would you go to a nice formal wedding where everyone's all dressed up and you would show up in dirty blue jeans and sneakers and a dirty t-shirt? And of course they would say, of course, no. So why not? Because this is a nice formal wedding, and I want to, I don't want to embarrass myself. Of course, I want to dress nicely like everybody else. Okay. So the same thing is true with shul, that we dress for the occasion, and part of dressing for the occasion is wearing religious attire. And in your case, that'd be a yarmulke. You're dressing for the occasion. It's like I had a parent whose child was getting bar mitzvah, and this was in a Reform temple where I taught. And I asked her, I said, have you ever thought about using a kosher caterer? And she says to me, no, I don't want to be hypocritical. And so I said to her, you're not being hypocritical. You're doing something special in honor of the occasion. I said, tell me something. If you went to one of these fancy White House breakfasts where they serve steak and eggs, would you not eat the steak and eggs because, hey, I don't eat steak and eggs for breakfast normally. I don't want to be hypocritical. Of course not. You'd want the steak and eggs. Why? Because you're doing something different in honor of the occasion. And I was thinking about the documentary I saw about Wyatt Earp. And they said, even though he wasn't Jewish, his wife was Jewish. And they said he used to go to her family's Sidurim for Pesach. And
Oh, really?
when he went to the Seder, the first thing he would do is he would come in the house, he would hang up his guns, and he would put on a yarmulke and come to the table.
See, what's funny is I was curious enough, so I asked a coworker of mine who's Muslim, and I asked them, if you had a guy who was, ex-Muslim or leaning away towards, Islam, and they came to the mosque with shoes on, what would happen? And he's like, oh, we just wouldn't let him in. We would just wouldn't, it wouldn't even enter our mind of even thinking it'd be okay. And that's where I kind of like admired that aspect of like, no, you have your limitations. I'm not going to go ahead and placate to you and tell you that this is okay. And I think that's where I get kind of frustrated. And it's like, I'm kind of conflicted in regards to, respecting someone's wishes and also understanding that maybe their wishes are stupid. Or just,
there's something called decorum. And like I said, then the way to answer your child a good answer would be to give that example of, going to a fancy wedding and would you wear dirty blue jeans and dirty t-shirt and dirty sneakers to go to this real fancy, beautiful wedding? And like, of course not, and you can make that analogy.
well, with your experience, I mean, with stories that you might be aware of, what do you think happened to a lot of people when I was growing up? I remember a lot of people going off the derech as teenagers, just a lot.
I think some of it, I think a lot of it had to do with, I hate to say it, I think our yeshivas, our Jewish schools, did not know how to handle the situation not correct, but didn't know how to handle the situation. Sometimes I've seen that too, where administrations in some of these Jewish schools will also, just like kids, will also overreact about, oh my goodness, he's going to have an effect on everybody else. Oh, well, this is terrible, this is horrible. And then they overreact. And it's like driving a nail using a sledgehammer instead of a small hammer, like driving a small nail with a sledgehammer. And I've seen where kids were suspended, and kids were fined, and kids were I mean, come on. These are kids. I mean, kids, you have to work with kids. You can't just throw them out like a brick, like a deformed brick. I heard that analogy once with I was going to a music teachers conference once, and one of the music teacher one of the big administrators and the music teachers in the school system said he has seen where music teachers, a kid wants to be in the choir, kid wants to be in the orchestra, and they audition, they really don't have any talent. And this one teacher said to this administrator, oh, if they don't meet my standards, I don't even let them in. I just throw them out. They make too many mistakes in the orchestra. They can't play their instrument. I just throw them out. And so this administrator said to the group of teachers, these are children. These are not bricks. You just throw them out. He says, you've got to learn to work with these kids. So sit down with this kid with the instrument. You remember the scene from, what was it, Mr. Holland's Opus?
You're going to have to remind me.
Okay. The girl who was playing, I think, clarinet. And she was having a horrible time with it. Very, very bad. She was trying to work with it over and over and over again. And she was squeaking, and she was getting this horrible tone out of the clarinet. No matter how she sat there and tried to work with it, like she couldn't do it. And Mr. Holland works with her. He says here, he says he shows her how to hold it better. Instead of blowing real hard, blow softer. And he actually sits and works with her so that finally she's able to play this beautiful clarinet solo. And the same analogy can be made for our kids with Yiddishkeit. Don't just throw them out. You got to sit and work with them. Talk to them. What's, ask them, what's bothering you? What do you, we really thought that the Torah, we think that the Torah is just wonderful. It's a beautiful, the Torah is a beautiful piece of work that can guide us through our lives. I mean, ask them what, and a lot of times you'll find it's not the Torah. It's something else that's bothering them. That could be very much totally unrelated to anything dealing in Yiddishkeit. It could be something social, something psychological they're going through. It could even be something that maybe they saw a so-called frum person do or say, that you have to explain to them, hey, what this person did doesn't speak for the Torah, it speaks for just that individual and their own hang-ups. And let me tell you what the Torah now really says about this, that this person is obviously not following. In fact, there was something I wanted to touch on tonight, which goes around that same topic. There was a woman, an Orthodox Jewish woman who's on YouTube, who had some sort of like documentary on YouTube that really, let's put it this way, I don't know where she was raised. Evidently the so-called Orthodox group where she was raised sounded to me like it was more of a misdirected cult than an actual Torah observant group. But of course now she's totally fried out. She's not observant. And she begins this spot on YouTube advertising her documentary by saying, a Jewish man wakes up every morning and thanks God that he did not make him a woman. And I remember when I was studying, when I first became frum, and we were studying in seminary, and of course that comes up, that when a person, one of the things that as a teenager that kind of turned me off to Torah Judaism was when I picked up a siddur and I saw that bracha. And I went, what? And because the first reaction that any woman, especially in the 20th century or this part of the 21st century, is going to have, we see something like that, thank God who has not made me a woman. It's like, ooh, sexist, machismo. What's that called? It's a term for a man who hates women.
Misogynist.
Misogynistic, right? Misogynistic. And so what people don't understand, it's not a matter of any of that. It's not a matter of sexism. It's not a matter of machismo. It's not a matter of misogynistic. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the semantics of the Hebrew language. In the Hebrew language, there are what I think 5 different designations for man or mankind or humankind or people. And these different designations relate to the different spiritual levels or to different aspects of what it is to be a human being. For example, ish, an ish, which pretty much in modern Hebrew translates as man, relates to a person's animal aspect of being a human being. So if that man says, thank you, God, who has made me, if he was going to say, thank you, God, who has made me a man. Thank you, God, who has made me a animalistic type man. And then there's Adam. Adam is like a man on a very high spiritual level, like a tzaddik. Now, how many men can wake up in the morning and say, thank you, God, for making me this amazing high spiritual tzaddik? No, I don't think so. And you get the idea. So semantically, the only thing that makes sense is to say, well, thank you for not making me a woman. Because let's face it, we thank God every day that he has made us ourselves. That, everyone else, like the saying is, be yourself, everyone else is taken. So part of being ourselves is being either a man or a woman. So this is why it has, a man says, thank you has not made me a woman, because semantically, he can't use any of the 5 words, depending upon his level or what level he thinks he's on, whatever. But the best explanation for that was the morning after my wedding night, when your father put on his talis, and I heard him say the bracha, Shalos on the Isha, and I looked at him and smiled and said, "Yeah, I'm glad God didn't make you a woman too."
So what I learned as in school is similar to that, but what happens is that the blessings in the morning are based off of the requirements that have to get done throughout the day. So the first thing you do is you wake up, so you say Mod Ani. Then the next thing you do is wash your hands, so you say Nitilas Yadayim. Then you use the bathroom, so you say Ashiyatzar. And it goes down and down, and all the blessings is for a man to be grateful with who he is.
Yes.
And understand the trials and tribulations that women have, and to be lucky enough not to have those trials and tribulations. That's why right afterwards it says Shlo Asani Aved, thank God I'm not a slave. Then it says Shlo Asani Isha, and then it says Shlo Asani Guy, because the trials and tribulations that each people have is more than what I'm going through, and I should be lucky that I have this, and then grateful that I'm not going through these trials and tribulations. So I find it very frustrating a lot of times when it comes to non-religious Jews or spiteful, angry Jews or ignorant Jews that don't seem to necessarily understand certain aspects of Judaism. And then when you finally get like a positive answer, they look at it like, oh, that's not real. That's just some hokey pokey stuff that people are just trying to give to the common folk so they can brush you off. But what I find frustrating is that's the actual answer. I was taught that in Hebrew school, in a Jewish day school, and I was understanding as I was learning in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade of learning how to say blessings, and then in high school, and then when I went ahead and was going to yeshiva to get smicha, so like I had to study prayer and the meaning of prayer, and so it's like it got that same answer every single time. Like there's no thing, and it's frustrating because like sometimes you see someone make a comment online or you watch a video like that, what you were talking about, and you just want to like shake them, or you want to go inside the computer and like just tell them what's going on.
Before the age of computers, you would yell at the television, or you would yell at the. Today, even say you yell at the radio.
But I think I guess it just doesn't matter, because like if you want to believe some negativity, no matter what I say, you're not going to believe me. So why bother trying?
Well, you never know. Sometimes, I've met a lot of very fine people, of which I am very close to one of them.
Yeah.
Myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
That when I went through, like I call my atheistic years, it wasn't that I was a bad person. It was I was ignorant. I was just plain ignorant. I went to Hebrew school, whatever, but I never was exposed to any real essence of Judaism or of Jewish learning. And once I was actually exposed to it, it was a whole new ball game.
Yeah.
But I think one of the says, like I said about the schools right away, getting like overreacting. And when a person, it's like fight or flight. When a person gets upset, like if they're like a gut reaction is to get upset or scared, and the fight or flight, the adrenaline starts running and the fight or flight mechanism kicks in, you can't think. I mean, so you just react. And I think this is what's happened. This is what happens with many Jewish parents and with many administrators. They're just they're scared that this could, and they just overreact. And I think if they would just take a deep breath and calm down and sit and talk with the kid a little bit.
Well,
that would be more constructive.
It's something that I'm realizing now that like, because, and here's the positive thing of and one of the reasons why I was listening to this podcast with Shulam Dean is because I'm glad that a lot of people that are leaving the fold have a voice now to enter the frum world and explain to the frum world why they left. So maybe there could be a way of, a way to prevent that in the future, or even just understand, it's the feeling I know for me and a lot of my friends, there was this feeling that secular world was cooler and secular world has a better mindset, that we're just kind of living in this world of, nerds that are stupid.
Oh, gosh.
And
Uh-huh.
and then, over time, people usually find their balance. Either they either become super religious, then they become super not religious, or they find their middle ground, whichever it may be.
Yeah.
And it was, I think it was also like a wave, and this is the way I saw it growing up, was that the real big first wave of Baal Teshuvas, having large families,
Mm-hmm.
really started not confusing. I don't want to say confusing, but really had kids question certain things, and I think they were misdirected. And what I mean is
Mm-hmm.
that your parents were super from, your grandparents and aunts and uncles were totally not from, your school was super from,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone was scared of you becoming from or not from, one way or the other. You had your aunts and uncles just bashing all sorts of religiosity,
Yeah.
and then you had your religious family freaking out about maybe like putting a milchika plate on a meat table. That's not even a halacha. It's just some conniption that people have developed over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like once me and a few of my friends realized, like, oh, everyone's just retarded, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. And
Yeah.
and I mean, and that's where, like, looking up to, I guess, looking up to rabbis to help guide us, that's when it's kind of happened, where some people fell off the wagon, because you had rabbis that were flawed, and because they were flawed, their either advice or their respect from us was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the reason I thought to myself of why I didn't ever like really go off the derech, even though I had plenty of friends, people, and reasons to do so, was because I think it was because I was Lubavitch and went to a non-Lubavitch school. So whenever any rabbi that wasn't Lubavitch would do something that was wrong, in my head I was like, oh, he's just a misnagid, he's not a real yid, so I'm just gonna like not worry about it, because it's just not something I felt like was necessary to concern myself with. But I noticed with people that, are Lubavitch and went to Lubavitch schools, a lot of them fried out because of the intensity of the system and the rigor of the system. It was very hard to just let yourself breathe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know what you're talking about. And quite honestly, I was talking to some parents. We were talking about some of the intense schedules of some of these yeshivas, especially for for high school boys. And we said, what working adult could really put up with a schedule like that? Yet we expect our kids to do it. I agree with you totally. I think, well, I think some of the yeshivas have got to step back, take a deep breath, and take a good hard look at what they're expecting of these are young, active kids. You can't expect them to sit behind a book for 8 hours. You got to get real about this. And in fact, it's not even healthy for, kids to be sitting so long. And there were some schools. I mean, fortunately, it depends what area you live in, but I think like I noticed in Baltimore that there are more of a variety now of Jewish schools that are springing up that were not there when you were in elementary school. And some of them are starting to, look at their schedules in a more realistic light. And that's, and you can usually, in fact, I was talking to a woman today who, the other day actually, who I was talking to a woman who she took her kid out of this one Jewish school, and she put him in another school, which wasn't that hot, which did not have that demanding of a schedule. It was a little more secularly oriented, a little more relaxed, fewer hours. And she was when she told me about it, you could tell like she was like almost ashamed. I said, look, I said, I tell my kids this: when it comes to education, you can't worry, you know, Chabad, not Chabad, a good, not a good, whatever, litfish, not litfish. You have to pick the school that caters the best to the educational needs of your child, no matter what, no matter what school that's as long as it's an Orthodox, a Torah Jewish school said, don't worry about it. And she kind of relaxed and responds, says, you're right. And in fact, he is doing better there. He is more relaxed, he is doing better there. And the same is true, like the Rebbe once spoke about this, about the medical profession. He said that if you have a choice between a doctor who's Jewish but not as good, and you have a Goyish doctor, but who's a very good doctor, you choose the Goyish better doctor. Same thing is true of schools. You might have a school that's very, very, ultra Orthodox, but it's got a schedule and it's got a curriculum that is not meeting your child's needs. You might have a school that's more, we might want to say, okay, like more modern Orthodox, that it does meet your child's educational needs. And what do you choose? You choose the modern Orthodox school that caters to your child's educational needs.
And that's something I feel like, I think it's very important. And I think also having caring parents that still want the best for the kid, but just wants them to know that they're being loved and cared for, I think is the best in the long run. Even if the kid doesn't stay religious, but knowing that they have a home to go back to.
And also this, I think it's very good. I think it's very important. I think that's very, very, I think it's extremely important. And I've known parents who, when their kids went off the derech, did exactly that. That they told that particular kid, listen, whatever your level of religiosity is your personal business, but I just want to let you know, I love you and I accept you for who you are. And you'll always be welcome to my house. Come for Shabbos, come for Yontif, come to have lunch, come for dinner, please. You always be welcome. And those kids came back. They were out, they were out in the world for a little while, 1 or 2 years, whatever, and eventually came back. They came back to Fromkeit. And they said it was, that attitude, that open attitude that their parents had, that actually brought them back sooner.
Because I think about that. And another part of me is also like, even if, because I know this one family who are like, the parents are very loving and kind and caring. And I don't believe most of the kids are from, or even from to the level of where they are.
But you never know, they might come. Listen, people aren't stagnant.
No, I'm very well aware. I'm very well aware. And it's just like, it's funny because I never expect myself to have such a hard conservative line of Fromkeit compared to like.
I never expected to be Orthodox, but I never expected to be from, period.
What would your teenage self say to you?
What happened to you? What did you do?
What did you
used
do?
To be so cool. I'm joking around.
I mean, were you cool or were you a nerd?
I was a nerd. I love classical music. My idea of a good time was going to a Baltimore Symphony concert.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, the boys I dated mostly, I liked boys that were nerdy. Mm-hmm. I liked boys that were very intellectual, that were very nerdy, that were really like real book guys. I never went for the jocks, never liked the sports guys. I went, because I found that the real good looking, jocks, they love themselves a little too much. I found the nerdy guys nicer and more humble.
Well, they had the statistics, and they found that women don't like super handsome guys. Women like a little handsome guys.
Yeah,
guys with just a little bit of handsomeness to them. Nothing like too like rock hard, because then like it's just it's too uncomfortable. Girls feel intimidated.
Yes, that's so true. In fact, I've noticed in general, My father mentioned something one time about, he was talking about boys. He said a lot of times boys feel more comfortable around a girl who, okay, maybe she's nice looking, but she's not like drop dead model gorgeous. They just feel more comfortable around her. They feel like they can be themselves and they just enjoy her company more, as opposed to a woman who's like, oh my God, like you're talking about supermodel beauty.
Yeah.
That there's something like, I don't know what it is, that they feel
It's
they're
intimidated.
scared. Yeah.
It's intimidation.
Yeah.
It's because there's a level to it. I'm just guessing here from my experience. Is
Mhm.
you feel like you hate yourself enough, but you feel like you hate yourself even more when you're with them. Like I'm unworthy. Like I'm not like whatever. And that's where it gets to this comfort zone of
Uh-huh.
knowing that, like, oh, it's okay, it's fine.
Mhm.
The being yourself is the feeling that, you know
Mhm.
it's it's not that big of a deal, because if it's too hot, if you're getting a 10, if it's doing all these things, there's all this pressure and all this, stress, and you're like, oh my God, I have to do this, blah, 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 blah. But I think I remember there was one person that we know sent a picture. It was a very attractive woman, and on the bottom it said, some guy out there is tired of it, is tired of her stuff. So it's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. By the way, as you were talking, I recall it. I think this article was published um, in the early 1980s, late 1970s. It was by Gershon Winkler, and at that time, I remember when I was growing up, if kids went off the derech or if kids intermarried, the parents would momish, disown them, and sit shiva for them. You probably heard of those stories.
Yeah, I have.
And so Gershon Winkler said, look, he said, basically, he says, we've come to a point in Jewish history where we can't do this anymore. Stop this. He says, the best thing for you to do, for a parent to do, if this happens, is to, keep communication with your kid, have a relationship with your kid, and you, as the parent, examine your own level of frumkeit. Because many of these parents, the irony was that a lot of these parents who were disowning their kids and sitting shiva for the kids, quite a few of them were not really that orthodox. They were like, quote unquote, like a little bit conservative, you might want to say, in today's standards.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of them didn't really keep strict Shabbos or kashrus. And so it's like, instead of blaming themselves and saying, hey, my level of observance wasn't that great, and so it shouldn't surprise me that my child's level of observance is less than that. He said, instead, you as the parent, go ahead. He says, put mezuzahs up, get some sefarim. He says, you start working on your observance. You become Shomer Shabbos. You start to work on your kashrus. And your child will look at you. If this is like, these of course are older children, like late teens, adult, early 20s. And if they criticize you about the way you raised them, about the level of frumkeit which they saw in the house, you say, you tell them, yes, that was a mistake on my part, but I'm correcting that now. And I've realized it's the best thing for me to do is to be studying more about Judaism and to become more religious. And he says they might actually eventually start to, follow what you're doing. That was his suggestion. But I remember growing up hearing about like Orthodox Jewish parents were very, very strict with their kids, like especially girls, like, oh, now that you're 7, you've got to dress the knees. You can't walk, you can't walk around in sleep, in short sleeves or sleeveless, and you got to do this and you got to do that. My first experience with a Shomer Shabbos family, actually it was my Shabbos family in Baltimore, was when their oldest daughter became 7 and had to dress the knees. Instead of the mother being negative and saying, "Ooh, you got to dress the knees now. You can't wear this. Can't wear that." She said to her daughter, she goes, you're 7 years old, oh boy. She goes, guess what? You're growing up to be a beautiful young woman now, and you get to dress just like Ema, just like a woman, with sleeves to the elbow and a beautiful long, beautiful skirt past the knees. And the little girl was actually excited. She put on like when she first put on like started to put on Snea's clothes, she was like parading around the house and going, I am dressing just like Ema now. I'm a big woman. I'm dressing like Ema. And she was so happy about it. And I was so impressed with
Yeah,
that, with that attitude.
I
Because I'd
think that,
heard because I had heard so much about the opposite way of dealing with that.
see, I that's where I've heard that story before. I think we've talked about it, and
Mhm.
that's where it's like it gets it gets to this point where you have to stop thinking in a negative headspace because it's not negative. And I think that's where, we're slowly getting to the times of Mashiach where it's like people are slowly getting like, oh, this isn't a pain, this isn't a torture. I actually enjoy this and I love this, and it's very important to me. Um, I've watched a few people in my life grow from being totally not religious to being religious, and seeing how today's perspective is, it's just because it's such a beauty to it. Why would you want to squander it?
Mhm.
And I heard this one comedian say something about like religious people. He's like, even if, at the end of the day, there's nothing out there, like you're done living in this world and that's it. At least you lived a purposeful life. And even when you pass away, there's that split second, like, oh, that's it. But that's all you have. Like you lived a decent life and you were a decent person. You didn't have to, you know,
Mhm.
it's it's kind of how I see it, where it's just like, even this is like, I try to see it, and I know we're running out of time, but the point I was trying to make beforehand was I started seeing life in a secular world, but a secular world that is being convinced of the Jewish mindset, and seeing how, you know the importance of Shabbos just on a secular level, how important it is, and kashrus, and the explanation of just my life and why I did it, because everyone, of course, questions why they're here, and I always try to ask the secular side of me of like, does the secular side of me think of religiosity? And it went from like, let's just forget all of it, to this is important, let's look into this, to,
Mhm.
oh, this is really important, let's keep this.
What did you saw? Who was it? The CEO of a company that instead of ringing the bell to start Wall Street, blew the chauffeur.
Yeah.
Who was that? I forgot.
He was a from Yid, actually. I think it was, shoot, what company was it? I literally just saw that video today. I know you're talking about.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a video it was a video of I think there was some company that it was like 30th anniversary of it opening, so they got to ring the bell, and he decided to blow the shofar instead. And just,
That was amazing.
it's
That
Jews are
was
being
amazing.
more prideful with who they are. They're not being unapologetically Jewish.
Well, you know what? Remember your brother, the Shaliach? What he did? What airplane was it? He did it on. He blew the chauffeur on the airplane.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw.
Everybody, yeah, that was amazing. That he actually they let him do it. That he made the announcement talking about what the chauffeur was about and why he was doing, and then he blew the chauffeur on the airplane.
Well,
Did you? Was it Kelly? Was it KLM?
I have no clue, Emma.
Was
I
flying
I
back from
don't even know what
Amsterdam or
the
something.
flight.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, but what I was gonna say was, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but years ago, when I was in Israel, um, I was really excited because I finally got to buy a Yemenite esrog for only like $5. It was amazing.
Hmm.
Usually they just, listeners out there, that usually costs like $500 in regular time. I got it for $5
How big
because
is it? How big
it was
was
like,
it?
about like, 5, 6, 7 inches like tall, like circumference was huge. It was great. I loved it. I was so excited. I was so
Hmm.
happy about it. And my my brother's friend, who wasn't religious, was like, "What's the big deal?" And I explained to her the importance of, the lulav and esrog, and how it's all Jews being united, and you're saying the blessing over all the Jews being united, no matter who you are or what you are. And she's like, "Wow, that's so beautiful." I'm like, "Oh, I'm surprised you didn't know that." And then like I went ahead and spoke to my brother. I'm like, "What's the big deal?" And